the morning here, and I'm in the chaos of children.
I can
But
hear. Oh my gosh.
he's
Well, congratulations, first of all. And
he's thanks, man.
secondarily, I will go through that now.
Yeah, when is the due date?
I have had no single place in America, in the USA, that has no Mexicans. Every single place I have stepped in, including isolated places as Montana.
Oh, Montana's great for Mexicans. Yeah.
If we began in this moment, I can say, well, I am a Papianteo and a spiritual guide from the Maya Quiché tradition. We're here in this conversation with Paul, and we're talking about a very interesting subject.
I saw your video of the hurricane poster. Was it a hurricane or just a storm?
Hurricane, but when it was in the place we were, it was just beginning. It was forming. Then for us, it was not just like hitting that strong. It was beginning to gain strength when it begins with us. But still, we have an amazing quantity of winds,
Oh yeah.
rain,
Yeah.
thunder. And in a moment, we were planifying also the wash ribats, but fortunately, the the eye of the hurricane crosses. And in that moment, that was like 2 hours, as to say something, we could perform the ceremony and do the offerings and sing to my baby and everything. Then later on, it returned heavily, but later on, it began to hit to go up, and finally, it hit northern Mexico and southern USA in a way that was really strong.
Very dramatic. So you guys were on the east side of Mexico.
Yeah, exactly, on the coastal area.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see a hurricane next to the sea. The sea becomes very violent.
Oh yeah,
Spectacular to watch.
it's a spectacular. Is amazing because you can see the power of nature and how, and once again, how small the human being is compared to that. Because in the fascination, it's a terrifying and at the same time an admirable
It's very
spectacle.
humbling. It puts you in your
Yeah,
correct place.
exactly.
I feel like it affects the philosophy of a culture if they are directly confronted with these type of forces. You know,
Yes.
like here we have so many things that can kill you all the time. So it really changes the way you walk in the forest or whatever.
Truth.
Like
Truth,
an
truth, truth.
earthquake. An earthquake could just come in any day and just destroy your house.
Your business, your investment.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because it's always on your shoulder, it changes there's becomes a whole culture about that, and there's almost a way of you can ask the storm, please spare my house, and things like that, or the earthquake or whatever.
Yeah, you have to have a better communication with nature because, for example, there was this other change also in the Baltic Seas, and there was a storm. That storm destroyed a restaurant of a Egle's friend, Egle's family, I think, and all the investment was gone in one night. Another friend who lives in Greece, all around or surrounding her area of living was also destroyed by fire. And then there's a moment in which you begin to think, oh my gosh, this time I'm safe. But anyways, uh, thank you very much not to touch me in this moment, but still, it can happen in any place. And that was one of the things that Egle and I we were pondering, like when we do have to return, will it be still raining? And when we returned home, it was kind of peaceful, but later on, once again, I had to park. I couldn't even see through the
Oh
windshield.
man, that's very dramatic. The heavy rain, hey?
Yeah, and
Uh,
toward us. Then I was like, oh no, 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 no. but
so
but
you
we are very happy.
so you drove from the seaside back home.
Yeah,
How long is it? How many hours?
5.
That's not too bad.
That's not too bad, but on the rainy conditions and not
Oh
going
yeah. Well, you can't
fast.
finish.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
the other
had.
day, almost the same time, my friend. Actually, it's really funny. We have a big house here now, and upstairs, was empty. So I invited my friend to come and stay with us, and so he's living up there now, and he's also Lithuanian.
Oh my
So we have
God!
a Lithuanian living here in the house.
There's a Lithuanian in Paul's house, Egle. What's
Wow,
happening?
is she there? Like my favorite word in Lithuanian is
Lithuanians
666.
are-
Have you heard this word? How they say it?
No,
It's very funny. Ask her to say 666 in Lithuanian. It's so funny.
give me a moment. Egle, can you pronounce 666 in Lithuanian?
Is that yeah? That's exactly it. Yeah. It's super long and
It's super long.
yeah, yeah. Suddenly now that's on my list of places that I need to visit.
Oh, you will enjoy the country. You have to go on summer, by the way, but or in the
Yeah, I can
beach.
imagine that. Yeah, you were there in winter, right?
I was there in winter, I was there in summer, and I will return in
Oh,
winter.
okay. So you were there in both seasons. So summer's much better, eh?
Summer is so beautiful, so sunny, everything is blooming. In winter, well, is what it is. Is snow, snow, snow.
So yeah, it gets pretty, and then the people just drink. They drink
Oh,
and they drink. Yeah, right.
and that explains a lot of their own, let's say, national mood, and because they are very private. But well, just analyze the weather. You have to be private. There's no other way.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it just goes back to what we were saying before with the big tropical storms and things. Like the weather, it kind of informs your philosophy.
Yeah, that's something that I mentioned in the beginning of our classes. If you remember or you recall, I was saying that there are so many philosophies in which it seems like nature to be so against the man, and then you develop your ways of for understanding that. But here in the tropics, because still Mexico City belongs to the tropics.
It does. I
Many
always think about it as a desert.
well, Mexico has everything, and Mexico
So
is
Mexico City is not in the desert. I always thought it was up high in the desert.
oh no, this in reality this is a highlands, and it used to be forestal highlands. There are still some forests, but the level of area can be semi-desertic, and in the south you have all the springs and all the water. We are close. For example, Egle and I, we are very privileged in the sense that we live close to a lake in the middle of the city. But people from the north and the industrialized areas, they look like that looks like nowhere's land, full of fabrics and places isolated and sad and dark. But
Very
the south,
industrial.
yeah, very industrialized and cold.
That was my image of it, but I still, it's some place that I'm very fascinated to visit. Especially, I would like to see the museum there.
Oh my gosh, yes, we have this city. I don't know which is the ranking in this moment or how accurate is the ranking, but it is said that Mexico City is one of the cities, is the encyclopedia city because it has more than
Mm.
200 museums. And look, for example, look at me that I'm so up to culture and to do visitations and to learn and everything. I don't know everything, but Mexico City is so full of traffic. There are places in the city that you can last 2 hours to arrive.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, and 2 hours to return.
Each way. So 2 hours to get there and then 2 hours to come home.
Yes, and it's still the same city.
Right.
You're like, wow.
Do they have trains? Is there like a big train system or not really?
Subways. And there's a very good one system of subways.
That's good.
Really good. But as in Japan, there are so many people that they are always crowded to hell.
I
And
see. Again, it's a place to avoid. Yeah.
yes, as a fact, for example, Neil and I, we have the rule to not to go that far away on Fridays or to
Oh,
avoid.
totally. That's a good idea.
And Neil and I, we go for, let's say, daily things, just close, just in your area. And sometimes even in the city, when a person asks for a consultation, sometimes I said, let's go to video call.
Which is an amazing tool.
Yes.
It has become a revolution.
And now everybody is accustomed to.
It's
Prior,
normalized now. Yeah. Everybody does it now.
yeah, previous to pandemics, there was a lot of people reluctant to that because they were like, I want to know you personally, and I was and my position is, well, I would like to also, but uh, at the end you have to think about how to do economics of time also.
So it's really it was a good result of the pandemic that everybody got used to this kind of infrastructure of doing things online.
Even paying, it's like, oh my gosh, one part of the payment was only for gasoline and one activity per day, and big cities push you to this.
Yeah, I wonder how that's going to change over the next 100 years or so. I could see
I
this.
don't
The cities are starting to become more and more unnecessary.
stressing unnecessary, and what you have to do in the effort or making your life sustainable is not precisely like in the percentage of efficiency. And I'm not talking just make money making, but for example, just by any ways, you get stuck in the traffic and you begin
Yeah,
to
just
be
time. Yeah, managing time.
and you begin to be hungry just in my or you need you need to go to the bathroom. In Mexico City, it's not unusual that some people stuck in traffic will ask an Uber Eats for to deliver the food in the next corner, and they arrived.
That's awesome. That's, I think, Mexican style.
That's so peculiar.
We wouldn't have that here, but that's really funny.
That's
That's
really
how.
funny. On the other side, I don't know what it's going to be because there's distances and places and a different way of racism that is not racism as such is classism, the division between the lower classes and the
Right,
middle, the high classes. That is our problem in here.
right. I can see that because there is a kind of a high society Mexican. Like, who's the very billionaire, the very rich Mexican guy from Mexico City? Carlos,
Carlos Slim,
right? And so there's the very top
Delgado.
of the class right there. And then the bottom is you have these peasants that are begging, basically.
Exactly. In here,
And,
that's a problem. And
right.
that produces not, once again, not what is racism, but precisely what is classism. You cannot enter in certain places, or or you will be having problems just by the way you dress, for example. But it's not the color of your skin; it's your social position.
Yeah, I actually heard that there was a rift between Guatemalans and Mexicans.
Oh yeah.
What? Can you explain this? Because to me, no
For example,
offense, I'm sorry, you guys look the same.
we are the same.
You look the same to me. I don't understand. Like, to me, it's, you look like Central Americans. Like, I don't know the differences between Honduras and, Nicaragua and Guatemala and Mexico. But apparently, I've heard that there's some battles or some tension between the groups.
Exactly. Me being, my case is peculiar because I'm actually Mexican Guatemaltecan person. Or if you, and Mexican just in sense that I was born here, but I do belong also to Guatemala culture.
I
And
remember I was listening to a podcast and you were saying, or not a podcast, but a class recording, and you were saying people were going to Nawala asking about some Nan A and stuff, and they go, "Oh yeah, the Mexican."
yeah, exactly.
So they know
Exactly.
you as the Mexican.
Yeah.
But
The
in Mexico, you're the Guatemalan.
Exactly. Exactly. But I was always on the effort to show them that the border-like Mexicans also behave as the borderline Americans, like for example Arizona people or New Mexico people that can actually shoot immigrants in the deserts.
But
Well, Mexicans don't shoot, but they play their own part on that way of
well, I think like a lot of those tensions are economical. Because it's basically like, they have, let's say they're construction workers, who they are just laborers, right? And they're just sort of barely surviving in their society. And then all of a sudden, here comes in the workers who works for the lower price.
Exactly.
And so then they're taking food out of your mouth. And then at that point in time, it becomes like animals where they're just defending their food.
Yes.
That's what it looks like to me. That explains it.
No. We cannot simplify the stuff only through that, but yes, mostly all the migrations has to do with poverty,
right?
And the problem that I think or that I detect about the differences between the Southern Americans and Southern Mexicans is that the immigrants will not want to stay in Mexico. It's just a crossing place. In America,
right.
They will try to stay on the land and develop there. Then for us, it's just a crossing, and although that can produce a lot of stuff, there's also the people that is rejected in the border of the USA. They return, and sometimes they have to go into delinquency because having the no food in the stomach.
You know what's very fascinating to me about that is they never come to Canada. And then on top of that, the Canadians are so strict with them. They are not welcome to come. Whereas in America, they have some businesses where they're like, yeah, come work. You can do the farming work. And they have some industries based around that. Whereas in Canada, as soon as they touch the Canadian border, boom, it's like a wall. They'll go home. And they never come.
It's true, but let me tell you something that is very interesting. In the recent years, if not months only, or maybe due to pandemics, but there's a lot of quantity of Mexicans trying to do the legal, not like the attempt to go, no, the legal moving to Canada is promoted. As a fact, I have a friend that she said for the kind of work that her husband developed by digital work, they said, we're planning to go to Canada.
If you have a professional license, like you're a nurse or something, then you can go in.
I think that is the point. Because even the Embassy of Canada is opening always opportunities to professionals and students.
Yep, they'll do students, yeah.
It's very well known that if you don't want to cross with the racism and the problems of Mexico, you should apply to Canada, but in the legal way. And by the way, let me tell you one other thing that is very peculiar, because in Mexico, there's a lot of Canadian people. And
sure, yeah. That's our playground.
Exactly.
We go there to play, yeah.
But not in Guatemala. Because
who goes to Guatemala?
There's still this Canadian big company that is mining
Oh, the
mountains,
Canadian mining companies are famous for being so terrible.
and they are horrible with
Yeah,
people.
they're really terrible. Yeah, I know.
They develop a huge hate in Guatemala. Sometimes people from Canada, they say that they are Australians, or they say that, well, I'm agree.
That you know what's funny too about that is it's the same in Mongolia.
Oh,
Mongolians hate Canadians
oh,
because the mining companies go there and then they do these rough jobs mining and then they go to the bar and they fight with everybody and the locals hate them.
I can imagine. That's what is happening in Guatemala. As I
I heard
said, no,
that. Yeah.
Guatemala is a terrible situation. There's even the famous meme of when you visit Canada and there's the image of a beautiful landscape full of forest. And the next image is when Canada visits you, and you can see some mining, erosion, base, destroyed landscape, and the rivers full of mercury and stuff. Then that's a difference. But Guatemala has access to the sea, but it's just little access to the sea. And all the rivers conducting all this stuff from mining tends to arrive to the same place, and that place is horrible polluted. And that's one of the situations in that sense. But regarding some other stuff as nationality and everything, yes. Now coming back a little bit to the point, Mexicans and Central Americans and some other Latin countries, we share a lot in common. It's like a one block civilization.
I think so. That's what it looks like to us. Even though Mexico belongs to North America, we don't think it does. Like culturally, it doesn't.
I don't know if if the proper word is exodus, or the migration is so brutal, constant, that I have had in no single place in America, in the USA, that has no Mexicans. Every single place I have stepped in, including isolated places as Montana,
Oh, Montana is great for Mexicans. Yeah.
Dakota, South Dakota, or even the places that historically belongs more to Afro Americans, like
So
Alabama,
yeah,
Louisiana.
yeah. I heard that like New Orleans was very Spanish, and I heard that for the first time. There's a big Latin presence in New Orleans.
Well, yes, now Alabama is taking, and for example, there are places as LA, in which
L.A. is, of course.
it's Mexico.
Of course. Well, I think like historically California was Mexico.
And Texas.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like those are going to return to Mexico. I was actually just talking about this with my friend that maybe in 100 years, America and possibly Canada is going to break up into little pieces, more like Europe.
Or northern Mexicans maybe are going to get annexed to the USA. As a fact, there are politicians in the USA that say,
Interest. That's funny because we always think that you will absorb us, but you're thinking that we'll absorb you. That's fun. That's funny. I never thought about that.
that's funny. I don't know what is going to happen. As I said, there are actually politicians in the USA that says, well, the immigration is in this level, is producing this, is producing that. Why not the five northern, the most prominent states of northern Mexico just get annexed to the USA to join the union?
But isn't that where all of the most violent crime is?
Exactly. Well, the border.
You take them.
Well, the borders. The problem is in the border.
Right. I guess the violent border would just move south if we took the northern provinces.
Yeah.
Do you guys have provinces or states?
States.
You guys do states. Okay. All right.
An administration is almost the same, provinces. But for example, there's, for example, these fascinating statistics that Manhattan, the island, was native populated in the 16th century, the 17th century.
I heard the story of that, yeah.
some centuries later, present time, Manhattan once again has been so repopulated by natives that now they are the majority in the island. But the curious thing is that it's not the historical Native Americans,
Right,
it's
right, right,
Native Mexicans
right.
who are repopulated Manhattan, and there are entire counties in which there's no single, let's say, American white, as if you want to say like that. It's only
Yeah,
about
I'm gonna say that quote unquote American is our group, like big white people, but just to say that to make some sort of differentiation, the English speaking people, that kind of thing.
oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I've seen that. Well, again, though, with economics and family and stuff, like the modern people, they don't work, they don't want to work, and they don't want to have families. And so,
Mm,
for example, if there's some cleaning to do, well, I don't want to do the cleaning. I'm a fancy person. Let's bring in some Mexicans to clean it. And the Mexicans are like, oh, yeah, we would love to work, anything. They come in, they start working. Next thing you know, they start a business, they have a family. Next thing you know, they take over the community. It's their community now.
yeah.
And
Yeah, the other day I was telling Egle one peculiar history about this man that is a rock star who has skills in Zapotec language. And he was asked, and he says, well, in my neighborhood, although we are in a wealthy area and stuff, but all the nannies were Mexicans and were native Mexican nannies. Then some of us were chanted in Zapotec, in Mixtec, in Nahuatl. And sometimes they do even have more skills on the language than actually the Mexicans. Now, let me tell you, in the USA, for example, in some states, the communities of Maya immigrants has been growing at that level that now they have beginning to retake the culture over there. It's not by any means like surprising now that, for example, in Guatemala, there's the festivity of the Day of the Dead. Well, same thing is happening in Southern California. Exactly, all dressed in a Mayan way, performing ceremonies or doing the horse racings. And some immigrants, sometimes when they arrive to the USA or to other countries, as to say so, also, suddenly they discover that they are like sub-citizens or stuff like that. But when they recover their identity, their languages, their cultures, their ceremonies, as it happens with us, with the Maya calendar and the ways of looking at the universe, the reality, the time, or whatever, they began to reorganize. It's not longer than that unusual to see that culture has found new places outside the original countries. Mexicans also, and one of the most successful is these corporations of danza, with pre-Hispanic origin, and the organization as a tribes that later on get unified, and they have been growing in such a level that now there's at least a group in every at least, not less to say LA is full, but there are groups in every state of the USA. And Guatemalans and the Maya Quiche, Maya Ma, Maya Anjobal, Maya Ekchi, they are beginning to develop their own communities, bringing also or carrying also the use of the Maya calendar with leaders and stuff. I have been very amazed looking at things like the festivals communities organized are in no sense in any different from the original place. There's a new sense in between, let's say, natives or indigenous peoples, if you want to say it like that, in retaking the culture. And it's a fascinating fact.
I've also I think everybody's kind of sensed this and seen this, to some degree. I heard something that was very interesting that, speaking of LA, the Mexican gangs, um,
Oh,
especially in prison, some of them were starting to speak Nahuatl
yeah, yeah, yeah.
as a way of sort of avoiding the authorities.
Yeah.
So have you heard about that?
Yeah, I think, but I can be corrected. I'm open to that. For the purpose of enriching this, that in New York is functioning exactly the same. Some gangs has organized themselves through the common language and through the common indigenous language, not through Spanish and not through English or the mixture of Spanglish, as we said. No, through their own languages. And it's peculiar because, in that sense, they really avoid a lot of the pressure that they has is historically being pushed into. But also, sometimes that same organization pushes or push them or relatives or people to go outside precisely delinquency or to reorganize in a different ways. As I
Well,
said,
I feel like organized crime is much more complex, especially as it becomes more and more sophisticated than just delinquency. Like some very impoverished communities, like they'll enter into some businesses or something with a plan to stop once they have escaped their poverty. And then that's where the intelligence starts to come in, and then they become very sophisticated. And for example, if I'm a criminal, but I really don't want my children to be criminals, I want them to go to a nice school or something like that. So it's
that
the
is
intention of sort of evolving from poverty, basically.
exactly that is actually happening. And there's another stuff that is also very interesting. They create new, let's say, cultural groups or new ways of cultural creation. For example, I have visited the San Antonio, Texas artist communities, and I was fascinating in the way in which they actually produce art based expositions, expressions in a way that is like even more pushing than the Central Mexicans, for example. It's brutally
Well,
incredible.
it makes sense to me because if you grew up in a place where, when we were talking about this many years ago, where the people who did the old traditional things were old. They were the old people, your grandma's friends. And so the youth views these traditional things as corny, and old fashioned. And so then they are more interested in more exotic and modern things. It's all about more exotic things, really. Whereas if you live in America, you see all the modern American stuff, and so then the exotic thing would be the traditional Guatemalan things. You see what I'm saying? And so there's more enthusiasm for it,
Yeah,
right?
it's even more attractive.
It's more
Sometimes,
attractive, exactly.
sometimes I have seen things I can swear on the paper because I have seen it. That sometimes even some groups, organized groups coming from Mexico, cultural inheritance or Guatemalan cultural inheritance, have more permissions and are more free than actually the Native Americans. And I have also seen that some organized groups of Native Americans have gained pushing energy coming from these groups. They have begun to wake up again because, okay, our brothers from the southern border, they are also natives, but they come organized, they reorganize, and suddenly they grow in big numbers, while on the other sense, the other native groups has been fading away, but suddenly they got the push
Oh,
of the
it's almost the
dancers.
wind. The wind is in their sails.
Yes, and I have seen it too, because, for example, there are more powwows in which indigenous participation from other nations are allowed. and some of the actual, as I said, native nations has been pushed by them in huge numbers, and there's a lot of people who will want to integrate to a tribe in the USA. Also, that's also happening.
That's good because growing up in Canada, you can really see the tragedy of what happened to these nations. Like it, they look like they are dissolving, like you said. Where it's just like every time a new generation comes, it's more diluted to the point where it's very sad. And
Yeah, when I
I'm sure you've seen that.
yeah, when I published my book in English, when the version was available, I was contacted from a cultural center from Toronto, precisely, that
Hmm.
was in the effort of fostering and boosting like the remaining I don't know, cultures and traditions from isolated tribes that can have only 100 people and stuff
That's what
like
I'm
that.
saying. Like some of these languages now, only 10 people can speak them.
Yeah, and the woman told me I am a half percent Guatemalan Quechua, and I'm a half Chicao or something.
Mm.
I don't know the pronunciation,
I
but
don't know
I
the names. There's too many.
Chicao. So sorry if I'm not pronouncing correctly. And she told me I will buy 100 books of your product.
Yay!
Like, yeah, thank you. That's good. That's beautiful. But I celebrated the other stuff also. I said, well, and what's the purpose? And she said, because there's a lot of good culture coming from the southern borders, and this is fostering also another phenomenon that the young people from those fading tribes are now going once again interested because they saw that the brothers from the southern border are producing a lot of stuff that they hasn't been stopped. For example, in Mexico and in Guatemala, we already survived an extermination of 500 years. But more unbelievable is that, and the peculiarity of this that I'm seeing is that uh, some of the traditions are so alive and so growing and so steady now that I will say there's a lot of things in our traditions that are not in red lights. They are in green lights, evolving and adapting to the new times. For example, in New York, I'm always on the effort to help to empower people from my own understanding of my own formation in different indigenous traditions, and they are so happy to receive me, and they are so happy to tell us, give us, show us, teach us, and but at the same time the actual natives from the lands, they go and say, can I enter? Come. You just come. This is open. This is open to everybody. And that's something that I really evaluate about so many of the ways in which of the cultural immigration of Mexicans and Guatemalans, Nahuatl, Zapotecs, Quiches, Mams, because we are always open to receive the other, including, I don't want to be like putting like labels, but Afro Americans, Hindus. There are Hindus in some of the Mexican groups, and no, it's not that common, but it is happening anyways. And I think it's called interracial marriage also gives support and boost all of these phenomena.
Well, especially in your tradition and all this Zolkin stuff, once you start to explore and understand some of the ideas, it's very logical, and then the logic kind of just appeals, to anybody because it's just kind of common sense, very universal. It's not like you're
Yeah,
talking about only some strange culture which only applies to hundreds of years ago or something like that. You're talking about something which is very immediately useful, and there's a logic to it, and it's you can apply it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
to yourself and to your surroundings and stuff. But actually, I had a question that I've been thinking about as you were saying, like, so a lot of this booming and stuff, has to do with demographics and all that. But I've heard from some of my American friends that there's a big resurgence or pop culture interest of the Aztec calendar, or the Aztec version of the Zolkeen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's become quite common,
Well,
and that to me is very peculiar because of the missing history. Or can you speak to that?
well, there's a lot of phenomena. I will explore some ideas regarding that. One of the most beautiful things that I have seen regarding now the Solkin or the Cholpij, mostly of what is the let's say highlands culture of Guatemala, is that actually the tradition was retransmitted orally and generation by generation. There was no like like a reconstruction of anything. Actually, the tradition was preserved. We lost the political organization and the economical sovereign, but the traditions, the ways of healing, the ways of following the Maya calendar are strictly the same. For example, if I would like to apply my science, the one that I talk in my book, for example, to analyze the relationship between Pakal and his mother, I can do it. I can do it. There has been some publications of friends that has been doing analysis of the stelae and stuff, and looking at the birthdays of kings or what is registered as the reign of these. How did they choose war? How did they choose how selected some days? Well, let me tell you, it's the same. There's no change. I can read perfectly what were their motivations, even their symbols, even their ways of explaining the universe are strictly the same. You just have to study, obviously. You have to go through that. But if, for example, as it was my case, in the town in which I learned, Nahualha and Sija surrounding areas, there could be people that has never, let's say, opened an academical book. And I'm not saying that for that they are ignorance or so. No, it's just like the actual living ways are different. But whenever you saw them in action during a healing tradition or doing or performing certain ceremony or the days they choose or how I'm going to include how we choose, how we heal, you're going to be tremendously surprised that if then you open a contemporary book explaining what an stela is saying, and you're like, what? It is the same. For example, in Palenque, there's this temple that says that the gods were born in the steam bath. Well, the same in here. The same in the mountains is exactly the same idea of everything that is born in the steam bath, and that the steam bath is like the matrix, the womb of the earth, the caves, and everything. That is fantastic. Now going in another direction. Sadly, some other traditions really vanished. Sadly, some of the extermination were strong and really diluted everything. Some groups has been in the effort to do reconstructions or revivalism or to try to go through all the steps of the ancestors, but it's not necessarily the same. And I think that's the value of the actual Cholpij, is that still when in taking with, let's say, learning correctly, you can still taste what was and what it is, the viewpoint and the philosophy and the science of the ancestors in their authentic ways. And sometimes I do even think, even about myself, sometimes I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, um, I'm calculating the birthday in my cellular phone, but when I proceed to go to ceremony, I can see myself as millennial, millennium practitioners of the same exact way. We heal in the same exact way. For example, another example, my wife is pregnant in this moment. We are living these moments. My book is about the philosophy of pregnancy. And something that is very beautiful about this is that I have been tracking for the first time the other aspect of the medicine about pregnancy, because all my work was developed only in the mountains, and let's say only by hand. But for example, when we attended ecography, and the doctor was saying this, and this, and somehow I knew it already. And when, for example, we were tracking how contemporary science is looking at pregnancy, now I can see the differences in a dramatic way sometimes. But also, I can see how efficient, how beautiful, poetically, philosophy directed are the work of the midwives, for example, in central Quiché areas, MAM areas, or those who hold a more traditional knowledge, and how efficient the techniques are, how beautiful the woman is treated, how beautiful the world is seen, and how beautiful the baby in consciousness is treated. Now, I said, well, what an effort of hundreds of years preserving and now adapting to the contemporary ways is amazing, interesting. But on the other side, there has been also things that I will say is not proper to protect under the saying is my traditional knowledge, because there are things that were really broken. And for example, one day I attended a pregnancy moment. I'm not going to say the place and anything, but they thought that giving peyote to the mother was going to be good because she's a warrior. That is not a tradition. Or, for example, now they are with the cacao, they have been doing cacao ceremonies for pregnant women. Calm down, please. That baby is going to get hyper stimulated.
Caffeine, eh?
Don't do that, please. Or even the baby, like let's do a reunion to ask the soul of the baby with a cacao ceremony. They are already mixing different ways of looking at religions or blah blah. But wait a little. Those are not the native ways. There are some also fake reconstructions, as when we talk about the calendar of Arguelles, that is completely false. There are now you have we have to be clever to see who is really holding the credentials, because for example, following this example of the baby of the mother who was receiving peyote at the moment of pregnancy, they were also singing war songs, and they are beautiful for war, but not for delivering a baby. Just imagine the baby that is about to be born. Mom is already dumbed. The muscles are already in slowed motion. There has been repercussions, obviously, in the physiology of the mother, and the baby is in the inside and already is listening to these war songs that is not pleasant for a recent be born baby, and already the mother is in problems. That baby was about to die. The baby fortunately was okay, but later on, that sadly that baby developed a syndrome of being highly behaving, let's say, like whenever this baby encounters big sounds and stuff, he loses control and enters into what can it be, some sort of epilepsy epilepsy
This is
episode.
why when I approach this topic, I'm always really, 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 really humble, because I really feel like cautious, like I'm playing with fire. And if you have a fire in a fireplace and it's near some water and you're really careful with fire, it's okay. You can have a fire. But if you just start putting fire everywhere without knowing the consequences or something like that, you can really destroy yourself and everybody and everything around you. And
Yeah.
so it's weird because there's a balance point too, because I've been doing the transcript of this lecture about Ukarik, I think it's called Ukarik,
Bukai.
and it's about, part of it is about confidence and conviction,
Oh yeah.
and which is important, especially when you're in a leadership role and you need to make a decisive sort of action. That's a very necessary element, but that has to be balanced with a sort of a humbleness towards, almost back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, this is a hurricane.
Oh yeah.
Don't just start talking to the hurricane. You know what I mean? Come get me, or no. I always feel really kind of cautious about that, and so that's why I think feel go out of my way to maybe the word is feed the lineage before I start making up things, because you have to make up things at some point, because there's just some things you just don't know because every situation is different. But at the same time, there's a proper way.
Yeah, and people must be very clever. Well, must be very clever, and I will say, like, you can research the person you are living with, or you are going to be guided, because there has been also mistakes sometimes. Or for example, the full frame of what we call New Age is not necessarily that negative in some senses, but
I would agree
not.
with that. I would agree with that.
They can open breaches. They can there can be that can be the first step to enter into a more developed, let's say, practices. But sometimes in the menu also comes so many things that are not true. Cacao ceremonies, for example, are not true.
I love this. This is you're the original person who told me this, so I think it's wonderful, because so many I'm going to say fancy people, fancy women usually in particular, love this idea.
Yeah. Well,
They're in love with it.
fortunately, chili is not that harmless.
Totally,
Fortunately,
yeah. It's just some
it's not that.
some
So
cocoa.
I can recommend as a preparation for delivery of a baby. It's like calm down, or even during the pregnancy time to be consuming cacao with the baby just because it's ceremonial. No, you are getting that baby hyper excited or hyper stimulated, which is not
I
in
saw I saw a
baby.
similar thing, although this isn't, Mexico or whatever, but it's the stuff from South America, ayahuasca. That became sort of a thing where it became a very kind of a fashion.
It's even a standard now. For example, I
It
have a
is
friend that
standard,
is
yeah.
a psychologist. And she was scared because she wanted to know in Berkeley area what was like the level of offers for ayahuasca ceremony. And she discovered that every week there was like 20 plus or less the numbers. She says like 20 ceremonies per Saturday. But then she got an extended scholarship to go and to continue researching. She was completely scared of making this index of organizations, groups, and whatever that was offering in all San Diego, LA, Berkeley, and San Francisco areas, no less. And listen to this number. She told me like that. I couldn't believe. She said 4,000 ceremonies per week. And I said, oh my gosh, no, that's too much. I cannot believe. And she says, I have the papers, I have numbers, and even more, uh, if you would want to reduce the numbers to only the groups offering, still you're going to see that only 2% of those groups has people coming actually from the Amazonas. Like the let's say the original, let's say, leaders
Following the
of,
lineage.
yeah, is not even the 2%. There are 98% of people leading ceremonies in their own ways without the framework of the philosophy to develop their own ways. Because and she was completely scared. And when she asked me, "Have you ever done ayahuasca?" I said, "No, the Mayans we don't do ayahuasca." And she was like, "Well, there's people asking me for an authentic person that could hold an ayahuasca ceremony." And I said, "Well, in this case, this is not my case because I don't. It's not my tradition. I have never gone into anything like that, and it would be completely irresponsible to do so." She said, "Well, you belong to the actual 0.005% of people who is honest, because the other 98% offering these ceremonies will say, 'Come.'" And she was so surprised that some of those were also interconnected with uh, reincarnation, with Native
Of
Americans,
course, of course.
with the quest of the vision, even with esoteric Kabbalah, mixing
Don't forget
absolutely.
Jesus. Or Buddhism. Got to throw Buddhism in
No,
there.
no, no. You have to put everybody in the same bed. And she was like, "Fabi, can you believe?" And I said, "Well, but there's something that is not that clear to me." I told her because the number is brutal. And I said, "How do they manage to transport the herbs?" And there is,
Where did they get all the ayahuasca from? That's
of
a good
course,
question. 4,000 every week. Well, California is very populated.
is hyper popular. And I was also like, what is and I began with the other, what is the impact as is cities, for example, with Peyore in Mexico? What is the impact of the extraction of tons of Peyore and ayahuasca from the jungles? And she was like, "Fabi, I cannot even understand the stuff.
Well,
Nobody in the conservationism or to preserve or in the ecological, nobody. No, the organized groups are just to export and just to find a way and to manage to get that ayahuasca ceremony. And actually she said there's a percentage, but she said, but I'm not that sure yet of the ones that are not really offering ayahuasca, but something else. What? I don't know, but they offer something. They just get people intoxicated, and it is not even actually ayahuasca. It was like, oh my. And I said,
yo,
well,
go ahead.
wow.
You finish.
No. She was amazed. I am still amazed. In Mexico, for example, it's very well known that the quantity of tons of peyote that has been extracted is going to put already peyote is in the bias of extinction. Still, there's a lot of
Oh,
indigenous
the wild one, yeah, from the desert. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
desert,
those cactuses are yeah endangered. Yeah, so
but still the Native American church is growing, and they use mostly exclusively peyote.
well, you
And
can plant them. Like I saw some botanist. He has a nice YouTube channel, and he was scolding poachers for going out and taking these cactuses, and he says, "Don't take them; they're very rare. Just plant them. Here's some seeds. You can grow your own. It's very easy. But the wild ones, it's now because of poaching, it's almost extinct, and it's so stupid."
it's so stupid. And by the way, the cultivated ones are not going to develop that much of the mescaline because the mescaline is a way of the plant precisely to avoid being eaten. Then you can cultivate, you can have some in pots, but the continuous, let's say, water that you pour on them is going to vanish away the resistance the plant has as a way of a survival. And
That's interesting. You have to. I have no idea about any of that. I just because most of the people they just want to take this as like as a drug. They want to get high or something.
or maybe they will want to use mescaline produced mostly in an artificial chemical way. And well, maybe that's another way. I wouldn't say that way causes the same impact. But the point in the other is to chew actually the wild.
It tastes terrible.
Oh yes.
It's
I'm not
terrible
a friend
taste.
with peyote, but also I'm not a consumer. The Maya tradition is not about that, or mushrooms. The Maya tradition, the Cholqij and the Maya calendar goes free from any stimuli. No mushrooms, no peyote, no ayahuasca, no nothing, but you just cross the border and everything is the same, right? Everybody's going to say,
Well,
are
but
you a Maya shaman? I want ayahuasca. It's like, hey, man, no.
right. Well, I wanted to say this too, though, because like it's easy to pick on people that does regular, a new agey people that does recreational drugs, and makes their own ceremonies and things. But you can see the similar things with doctors and hospitals and kind of the fashion of procedures.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
right, like I was thinking there was this thing up until I think 1970s, when a woman was having PMS,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
the hospital would recommend to remove her uterus,
Yeah.
and it's called a hysterectomy. And they said, "Oh, this woman, she's having PMS and she's being hysterical, so we need to give her a hysterectomy and remove her uterus." And that was
Yeah.
according to these experts who are just making things up. They determined this was the cause, and they said it with such confidence. And later on, it was found that this is a terrible thing to do,
Oh, yeah.
and it's
And
backwards. And and what was this based on? Nothing.
nothing. Well, for example, I have another example from, I think it's from the 70s when they began to practice these cutting the connection between the left areas of the brain and the right areas, and they were zombifying the people, and people who will never be
Right.
like in one piece again. And there are a lot of, for example, in my area, I have been denouncing in my way, the industrialization of delivering babies, and the ways
Right.
of
That's right.
keeping.
There's another one because they do it so confidently. This is the way, blah, blah, blah. And it looks like bullshit.
What I have seen, and believe me, this is the things that I do, this is the things I go through, is that they began to bombard. Sometimes not even I will not say that mean or evil even. No, no, no. But they began to bombard the woman with this and this and this and this. By the end of pregnancy, the woman has already heard so many possibilities of actually of things that can be dangerous and actually not true. But the woman at the end
Right.
says, "Take me to the hospital."
Right. Right. That's right.
I now
Um,
I have seen it because I have been tracking organizations and stuff, and the way
mhm.
they talk about pregnancy is like, whoa. At the
It's
end,
like you have cancer or something. They're like, "Yeah, we need to remove the cancer and come in here with a knife and we'll induce you so you don't feel any pain. And you'll have to take these recovery drugs. And oh, it's very expensive, but I'm an expert." And they come in so confidently like that.
I began to track it to track this stuff in the environment of pregnancy, but actually it happens in everything. The effect of selling you first the trouble or problematic atmosphere to later on get you on the pills they sell.
That's
And
it. Because
and it can be applied to everything.
Because I was saying with the pregnancy, for example, in Japan, we don't usually give birth in a hospital. You give birth in a birthing clinic, and
Well,
uh, and it's done.
uh, uh,
It's ran by midwives, and it's the woman stays there for a week, and it's very and when they're giving birth, it's mostly almost everybody. They're pretty strict about it. They don't give any pain medicine or anything. It's
uh-huh.
just done completely, and they're very kind of Japanese. It tends to be very strict about no pain medicine. They're very very strict with it. And in this case, they're like, "Oh, birth? No, no, no. You wouldn't do that." And for the people who grew up here like that, it's normal. And then so they don't think about it. It's no problem. My mother didn't have pain medicine. My grandmother didn't have pain medicine. I don't need it. And They don't know. But for the women I know who gave birth here, but they were educated in a Western place, when they come to, it's time to give birth, they're very, very fearful of giving birth and very, very agitated, and to the point where they're almost saying, please give me the surgery. Please give me the drugs. Oh, I need them.
Yeah. Because you have already bombarded, even programmed.
I was just going to say programmed. They were programmed to react that way.
And by the moment you are so programmed that you really need it, because if they proceed with something else, you're not going to see the results. For example, in my case, I have seen that, and there are clients who told me stuff like this, like homeless people saying, well, I already went to the doctor, to the chiropractic, to the chiropractic, to this, to medicine, to Chinese, blah, blah, blah. You're my last resource, and I am like, why didn't you come with me at the first? But it's okay. Now you're giving me the most difficult work. But
they dig a big hole, and then they give you the big shovel, and they say, "Can you get me out?"
Yeah, exactly. That is very common. That is very common. And I said, well, I know we have to still be building a reputation, writing books or promoting different ways of doing our works as a professionals. Also, but sometimes when you arrive with me, there's no more to do. You already have 3 surgeries or stuff. Well, there's a little things to do. Why did you arrive at the end? But okay, that is also a phenomenon that happens. We, the indigenous peoples, or we, the nations, we, the tribes, we can do so much more to begin to portray this knowledge. For example, when I exposed the Maya knowledge, it's not unusual that I said, well, in this case, I'm working with herbal preparations, herbal balms or stuff. They has been proved to be correct during millennia. Then you should not be afraid of what can I recommend you. But, well, there's people that will feel more confident with the 2000 pill that with a series of teas and some herbal baths or stuff that, by the way, is hyper economic. But that's because of their own cultures has been bombarding people.
So back to what you were saying about sort of the growing renaissance, really, or revitalization of, let's say, traditional Mesoamerican cultures, communities, ideas, traditions. Do you feel like in the last, let's say, decade, you have been regarded more than you were previously? Do you know what I mean?
Can you repeat?
Like are people, like, are you noticing that more and more and more people are starting to go to you first, kind of thing, or are you starting to be more regarded as a professional rather than a witch doctor or something?
I risk my position in a moment because, or traditionally, the work of the Ahir is called spirituality. When I went into all the practices, the therapies, the ways of understanding calendarical, astronomical ways, I jumped a little bit from my own atmosphere by saying I'm publishing a book that is called Science. And by calling science, what I also began to say about this is a professional service. It's based on an ancient science, and the service is not hocus pocus stuff. This is a professional service with an already being clear, developed therapy to go through. Some people has been inspired by what I do. I have a friend in the Yucatan Peninsula that he also began to say, well, then you should not be just calling you that. You are also a doctor as such, and a philosopher as such, and you are a producer of knowledge as a scientist, not just as a fortune teller. You are not. He says you are not an astrologist. Also, it looks like. But what you are doing regarding consciousness, the baby, and the development of personality is makes you puts you in a different situation. This friend has became to call me in a regular basis doctor, and I feel so humble about that. But that's precisely the effort. There are authentic knowledges can hold an authentic ways of being developing healthiness and to also create beautiful things as art, not only like healings or spirituality or connection with God, the nature, or whatever you want, but also arts, for example. And
Yeah,
that is
I feel like there's two types of doctors in the sense, or like a doctor and a healer. Like in our modern society, especially in let's say in America, is amazing for this. They made a medical doctor such a well-paid job that it became all the intelligent, money-motivated people went into this career. And so out of 1,000 people, you got the five most money motivated, fairly intelligent people. They became medical doctors. And so the people who you get at the hospital, they're not interested in healing. They got that job because it's a well-paid job.
oh yeah.
Whereas, like, I remember I was at the hospital in China, and in China, a medical doctor is not a very well-paid job. And so all of the money people, they go into business. So you get a different type of person at the hospital. But in reality, what you really want, let's say, as a patient, is you want somebody that was born to heal. Because there's some people, they're called to heal, and it's their job. And once you really get into the more subtle things of healing, then it becomes connected to art. And it becomes connected to all these other more subtle things. Because you'll see a difference between a quote unquote medical doctor, physician, and then a healer. This person has a job and they get a salary, and this person has a destiny. This person has a calling, a quality to them, where for whatever reason they need to help people, or they were given the burden. I think in your case, the burden
Yeah.
where you kind of have to. What are you supposed to do with all this energy that you keep receiving, even though you didn't ask for it? Well, you got to put it to use.
Exactly. And and by the way, there's also the other difference. That is that, well, you love what you do.
Yeah, it fills your heart and soul.
Yeah, that goes with you. And that does not mean that necessarily you are going that that does not mean that you're not going to receive an economical, let's say, compensation. But also but it is true that first it comes your passion for to do what you do. On the other hand, there are so many fake practices that are only driven by money, but economical stuff. As I told you, one of the cases that my friend discovered, this one that I told you, was a woman from Arizona that was offering authentic Native American knowledge coming from an elder. When she began to be investigator, when the research was done, she was discovered not to have any background, right? But then she said, well, it's an astral master who gives me
Oh
knowledge
yeah.
by dreaming, right?
Yeah.
And at the end, it
I
was
help.
only.
I have a question now, because for me, I'm an outsider in the native world, but I'm obviously fascinated by it. What percentage of native healers are authentic, do you think?
In my opinion, in a broad way, because this is by no means strict, accurate, but
Yeah, right. Not just your opinion, not an official statistic, but in your opinion, because
yes,
yeah.
but I will say that authentic with the passion, with the love, with the substance to do it will be the 5% of the people that you
5%.
will see openly or publicly
And also
of
with a lineage too, right? Like, not just a dream taught me, or you know what I mean, or royalist type things, but actually there's a real lineage that you could go back until you can't count anymore.
exactly. There are people who can hold as a fact for example in the Quiché Maya Highlands. One of the things that is very very interesting to be noticed is that you have to track 7 generations back to you, and mostly the elders from the mountains, they can hold that very easily, and not only 7, who knows how many more. um, and you live by that, and you come with that, you grow up with that, and even you can reject going into that. On the other hand, is the self-made shaman offering you
Right.
cacao and ayahuasca and a reading of your Mayan horoscope.
Right. Horoscope is the secret word that we know it's fake.
Yes. Well, I was, for example, when I wrote my book, I was told several times, why didn't you include more about your actual work? And I said, well, I didn't want to write a manual for the tricksters. If you will want to know,
Which is what I'm doing. I'm writing the manual for the tricksters. At least for myself, I'm writing I'm trying to because the thing that I struggle with is, especially after so many years of doing this, I forget things.
But it's okay if it's your personal effort, and if you need that, you can write in the way that you need. But if you are going to come to offer actually that in another way, or as you say, well, for example, if you write a book and you said, well, my teacher is Tatu Papianteu, and his teacher was Nan Ia Tzok, and the teacher of Nan Ia Tzok was Maria Tzok, and Nan Ia Tzok grandmother was Talin Tzok, for example. You can track the lineage from where the knowledge goes, but if you begin with
that's the real way. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. That's in Mayan culture, that's very, very important and key point.
Well, remember there are we can call it principles. One of them is always honor the knowledge. The second is honor your teacher and honor the people who suffer even to preserve this. And the third one, which is in reality the most important, is honor yourself.
Yeah. But comes last, though, I think.
Oh, it's always said last, but in reality, I think it's the most important, because you have to be honest, and you can link what you are through that. Let's suppose that it is not, and you are very clever and wise, and life put you in the situations. Well, then maybe you have an oral lineage, but you have honesty. My
Which
teacher,
is true. Yeah, no, we've all seen that.
my teacher, for example, she told me one day. Well, my guide, woman guide, she told me, never offer what you cannot resolve. Be honest. She was always onto that. And I have found that mostly all the places that I used to be in, people is not honest. It's so terrible.
Yeah, that's why I've always hesitated to consult with people or anything like that. Because I feel, I always feel like, oh, I'm just learning this stuff. I don't really know. And I have to write everything down and check my notes and stuff like that. I feel like, given another 10 years or something like that, and maybe I can start to know. For example, the blood thing. I feel like a beginner. I have a kind of an idea of it or something like that, but I don't feel like I should be giving advice to people.
Well, sometimes I'm also still in the first step. Because, for example, I have been now not venturing, because venturing is not the proper word, but let's use it in this moment to cross to some other places, not only pregnancy stuff, in which is my domain area, but I have resolved a couple of cases of brain damage produced by injuries in accidents. That is something that I have never stepped in. I always were fascinating of how the brain can let's say redirect the flows and everything, and how can the brain can reconstruct the stuff. And it is such a very fascinating way to see recoveries from a non-standard way. And by the way, curiously, it's mostly all about attending the lackings of a person and providing also love and support. There's not going to be love 101 in the classes, never, right? But there's a moment in which you know that that is important to listen to the person until the last moment. Well, to let it cry, to let it go, and to have another approach to the illness is very important. And now I'm jumping into explore some new stuff, and I'm so happy about it because I love the people that recovers from a non-standard standard viewpoint of something. Uh, uh,
It's your life's work. That's what you're supposed to do.
yes, yes. Sometimes when people ask me things, as you said, I go back to zero, and I am like, oh my gosh, I don't know. And I began.
Well, because everybody's like, people have fucked up problems, you know. And usually,
Well,
when they come to you, their hair is on fire or something, and they're like, "What should I do?" And you're like, water. Put water on your head." I don't know.
there was this person that one day she said that she married her husband when the husband was actually like good in all senses. During marriage times, he was little by little going deaf from one of the left earring, and that everything was going worse because now also the right one was beginning to lose capabilities. And and I told her, well, let me be honest with you. Someone sent you because that person says that I was very good for certain ways of healing. I have never stepped into the ears and physiology or stuff related. If by any means this has to be or has any ways to be explored by the situation of the marriage, the kids, the development, or some other ways, I will do it. But to be honest, this is my first time. And she said, they told me so many things about you that I'm going to go even if you don't know nothing. You know, in that moment, I was shaking. I said, okay, she trusts me. She trusts me. I don't know, but I can do it. I will do it. At the end, the thing, yes, it was a little bit physiologically based, but at the same time, there was a blocking in the person in the sense that he felt since the beginning that he didn't want to marry this woman because he was conscious that genetically the family had those problems. And he hid it from the wife. Later on, it was obvious. Then, mostly one of the points of resolution for to begin to heal this person was precisely to talk openly and to begin to explore things in infancy, things in the pregnancy, that is his own pregnancy, that is the most peculiar stuff. And he recovered the right one. And we were like, yeah, it is so good. Some people will say, well, maybe it was psychological or some stuff, but no, actually, I had to do a massage in the muscles surrounding the earrings. I have to do connections with some of the inner organs to boost them, and the blood pressure, for example, and some herbal things. I applied all different things. This case took me like 2 years, but the right was completely okay, and the left ear recovered like 60%.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, but believe me, Paul, I was shaking as if it were the first case.
My right ear just twitched.
Oh. What are you blocking, Paul?
Who knows? I don't even know what that means. I'll have to go and look at the textbook.
There are cases in which there's an actual physiological damage. That is for sure. There are
Of
those cases.
course, yeah.
But there are so many others in which some sort of I'm going to give a term that I'm using just in this chat, but this like an spiritual dissonance or a conflict of interests in the inner self that in reality are producing such an impact that even the body responds to that. But still, you have to heal both because sometimes you really injure your body,
I
and you are,
remember. Yeah, go ahead.
and sometimes the people is not even conscious about what happened, or that, for example, it's not unusual that I said, you have these problems with managing with anger because mom and dad were fighting while you were on pregnancy, and people is like, how do you know that? And I am like, oh, I
It's
bet
my
your dad.
job. It's my job.
That's my job. Like, I bet your dad abandoned the house. And
Do you ever find like you have to be sensitive with this? Some people are really touchy about these kind of statements.
yeah, but remember that the majority of them arrives to me after doing so many consultations.
I
They were
see.
already told,
So they're
ayahuasca.
ready. They're ready to hear.
They are ready to hear something. That's the peculiarity of this position. That's why, as I told you, I risk my reputation by putting everything into science. I was ridiculized in certain points when people were like, science, ha 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 ha, yeah, of course, the science of ayahuasca. And I am like, you are so lost that I don't even use
Well, I
ayahuasca.
mean, one thing that would be really great to study, because for me, it's these are facts that are verified by the scientific method. If we set up a study, like a really strict study, where we could, for example, we could show that this novel has this behavior and this novel has this behavior, and that's as far as I've concerned, that's a well proven, very long time ago fact, and so I operate based off of this set of facts. But it would be interesting to actually set up like a very academic experiment, like a strict one, a very robust and like an experiment where we could test, like, here's our idea and here's the variables, and then we could sort of test them and show, like, here's our study. This is we apply the scientific method to whatever it was, that the question was. And because it is in my mind, we could prove it, of course. It's so obvious, for example, the differences in behavior or
Yeah.
preferences or whatever. Pick one. There's a lot of them, but I don't think it's ever been written out. Because as a teacher, we used to do like science fairs, and you'd walk around and you'd see all the different students would do a research project, right? And they would do an experiment in a dish with some whatever, it could be honey or some chemical or something, right? And they would have an idea, and then they would design the experiment, and then they would do some controls, and then they would publish the result, and then it would be done in a kind of a format. And I don't know if anybody's ever done that with this.
No, nobody. No, nobody.
Because in my world, it's 100%. Of course, it's going to be like that.
No, well, sometimes some things have their own ways to hold and to protect. But let's remember something. We come from a lineage in which we were, if we would want to apply the same word, we were the scientists of the ancient world. But then it comes the invasion, then it comes the new ideas, then it comes the contemporary world denying our knowledge. But for us who hold millennia of knowledge, we were actually the professionals of the ancient societies. And by the way, we can still be applying those knowledges in contemporary times. The pressure of being called brujos just because the new religion was going to be the predominant is not fair anymore.
What is a brujo? What does that mean? Because I don't know. We don't have that in English.
Like a sorcerer.
Oh, witch doctor. I see.
Yeah, or witchcraft.
Witchcraft. Yeah, exactly. It's witchcraft. Well, it's really funny because on the one side, well, they did the same thing in Canada, which I think because there's less people, because it's so cold, it was much more effective where they could just literally try to disappear any previous civilizations. They just go, oh, you don't exist, and history forgot you, and you don't exist, and we would just try to eliminate you from history. And I feel like the same thing happened to the Mayan, but because of the demographics, it didn't work. There's too many of you guys. You can never win. They'll just keep overwhelming you, and next thing you know, New York City is filled with Mexicans.
No, and for example, now that you're touching this point, obviously people from my own, let's say, my comrades, or the people that are developing things, let's say parallel to me, they will say, are you crazy? What are you saying that? We are only spirituality. And sometimes even your own people will try to stop you, right? And there are
typical,
so many things,
family members, even, etc., neighbors.
But also, but anyways, that also happens with actual scientists from the Western world. Some people are by passionate into something, and they are like, "What are you doing?" It's a human thing, anyways. But
I think so. Yeah, that's true.
But also, we hold what was the denigration or the derogative ways to portray what is the spiritual leader of a tribe, a nation, or blah blah. Some of our ways of viewing the world can be seen, are portrayed as to be folklorical, but actually, as I said, for example, I know this man that always says that he's the shaman of the soul, applying like the emphasis in soul. But I don't understand why he's applying soul. Soul as in the way in which it was coming from the other side of the world was also used to colonize the minds of people. To colonize and for example, there was even the Inquisition trials in which the friars were debating if the natives had a soul or not. Then already the word soul is derogative. There already is a way to deny that you hold your own stuff. But there's people in this world who also use the word as in a proper way, and I am like, well, we have to decolonize and then to go into new worlds with a good proper science, good proper therapy, good proper ways to be with the illnesses, this violence, or whatever that you would want to say.
Well, the word soul is based off of all these presuppositions. Like you'd have to presuppose all of these other things in order to have a soul.
Yeah.
And in the case of, let's say, a Mayan brujo, I didn't know this word. You're already taking in some foreign ideas, which are almost opposed to your own ideas. It's almost like you're an Aki and you're calling yourself a Rujo.
Well, there's people who will think that's what I do anyways.
Well, but it's funny though, because we don't apply that. When you see a Catholic priest, he looks like a Rujo. I mean, the way with the shaking of the stick and his funny hat and his jacket, and he looks like a crazy wizard. Or more seriously, a judge in a courtroom is like a Rujo. The courtroom is a very religious place, and the robe that he wears, and the desk, and sometimes the wig that they would wear. In Canada, they'll wear this curly wig.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous with the hammer and all. What is all this stuff?
Yes.
But it's really serious. All the people wearing the jackets and the suits are very, very serious. Oh, you can't go there. Don't step here and don't sit there. And it's really strict.
That's so. Those wigs are so peculiar because, well, they come from England, right? And in some of the colonies, they are still using that in a way that is so funny. I don't know. This part of the world was influenced by the Spaniards, but the colonies.
I see. You guys have a different one. Hey, what does the judge still wear the black robe? That seems kind of ancient.
Yeah, the judge in here can dress normally.
Really? Just like a jacket with a tie and like that?
Yeah, and it's Calvin Klein.
Calvin Klein. Oh man.
Yeah. When you see that the judge is wearing a feronat or something, you have to fear that. Or well,
And
the
he
other.
told me to go to prison, Calvin Klein.
Yeah, that's the moment you know that you are not going to pay the fee.
Right. Yeah. Oh, this is the Calvin Klein judge. It's too expensive.
Yes, and Calvin Klein is not even like when you see the Versace or something
Right.
like
Calvin Klein is the American brand. It's just not the European one.
that, and it's a standard. But still, if you see the Versace or something,
Louis
no,
Vuitton.
Louis Vuitton, and then you said when you see that or you see these Italian shoes handmade or whatever, then you know that you are going to a urine to shave.
Okay, back to the Italian
A
shoes really
wig does
quickly.
not also any. You would prefer someone with a wig.
Of
sending
course,
you to shave.
Nikes or something, hey?
Yeah,
Which are
not the
still
wig.
expensive, but not that expensive. Okay, I had to ask you about so Mexicans. Is it a Guatemalan? There's some crazy fashion where these guys wear these curly shoes.
Oh my God.
You know about this, right?
Yeah, well, like dwarfs, right?
Like
Well,
a
that's
dwarf. Well, to me, because I'm 6'7".
no, it's amazing. Well, but there's always a tension. There has been always a tension between Southern American USA cowboys and what is the mariachi or the charro fashion in Mexico. They share common things.
Oh
And
yeah.
by the way, the Texas cowboy is inheriting also the ways of the Mexican original people from those lands. But still, Texans and Northern Mexicans are always influencing each other in different ways. Obviously, it's more expensive in the USA, but they have this stuff of we have to differentiate.
Ah,
In certain moment, with a boom of this style of northern polka-based music, the musical groups in Mexico, they always dress very fashionably. You know, the golden
right. Yeah,
jacket,
yeah, 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 yeah. It's like a
yeah,
matching.
the Versace shirt and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure that there's all kinds of different, cultural things, that I could never understand. That makes perfect sense for you guys and looks totally strange for us outsiders.
Yeah, well, and by the way, the necessity to pertain, the necessity to be on your own tribe, no matter if it's is drug dealers or if it's just a musical group or if it's your spiritual companions, the necessity to pertain or to belong to makes you also follow some stuff, and there's here and there you can develop extra stuff.
So then, how do you feel about your traditional clothes? Like when you wear Aki stuff, like you put the scarf on the head, or sometimes you wear the hat, the fedora hat, or how much of that stuff is necessary, and how much of it is just cultural fashion?
I will say in plain ways that is well, I will say that it is also following certain ways of a fashion.
Hmm.
But now there's a problem. There's a peculiar stuff, and it's peculiar, and is that the original ways of dressing were in the beginnings designed to give you the symbols to distinguish you from some other members of the society.
Right,
For
right.
example, in my town, the handkerchief, or let's say the ceremonial headcloth, no, or the headcloth. I'm going to say now in this moment, the headcloth is necessary because it's cold lands, and you have to protect you, especially in the mornings, from the cold in the head.
Is that why? So I remember you said that a long time ago that it was just because it was cold out and you were just trying to keep your head warm.
Of course, you don't want to be with a permanent flu, and for example, that's one. The average people will use in my town, for example, the green, the brown, and red and black striped regular one with some yellow strips, and that's it. But it's protectional. The ahir or the spiritual guide will have be wearing The white one that has, by the way, origins in the classical times of the Maya. That was the sac hunal used by the kings and the high priests, as to say something. Well,
Hunal is a hat or a fabric?
it's a fabric, is a big headcloth made of two pieces of fabric, very beautifully waved, and the central weaving represents the universe, and the other 4 points of this square
Right. The more
represents.
I, yeah, the more I study this stuff, the more fascinated I am by between the connections of weaving, and the metaphors of weaving, and also reality and life in the world.
And it's a communication, because
It's profound.
yeah, and the way that they, for example, in an average in the town, let's say it's a Sunday, let's say it's the market. Well, you can distinguish the person by the way the person dresses. It's a code in between the town. It's a code of dressing that makes you differentiates your position in society, which in Maya ways can be in different levels, right? But there also you can ask a bigger one in white or a bigger one in blue, or making combinations or dress more fancy or more expensive. Then you are also showing, for example, that you have better improved capability, economical capabilities. But then, for example, now in these moments, the young people are jumping not on to use the handkerchief but the Nike hat, and now is the sign of distinction that you have economical possibilities, not the old headcloth of the grandfather. Then sometimes that has been pushing the spiritual Ahir to make even bigger changes or more fashionable, more colorful ways of embroidery in the clothes to make the distinction. But for example, as I said, a headcloth can cost, let's say, $500. That's to say something,
Oh,
American.
really? It can be very, very, very expensive.
Very expensive, takes its times, even takes its ceremonies. That's why it's also very important for
The special person has to make it.
mostly the wife of the spiritual guide, but if not, his mother or his grandmother. It depends. But as I said, now culture begins to shake because of foreign influences. And now for the kids, it's not the handkerchief. For the kids, it's not no longer the wool jacket with beautiful embroidery. It's the Nike jacket and the Adidas hat or stuff, or the tennis shoes. No,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
less to say Jordan shoes or stuff like that.
Ooh, Jordans.
Oh my gosh! But the point is that at the end, what you are doing is expressing and communicating who you are in this society. Then that's and one of the things that I do love about my town is that the headcloth, headband, or a ceremonial handkerchief has is identical to the way the depictions of their use is in classical times in the lowlands too. Contemporarily is called Sutapal Sut. The one you are distinguished by that name because you are the person that do the prayers, the ceremonial chanter. You have a position in your own society. In ancient times, it was called Sak Hunal, the white of the one, and or the one in the sack cloth, or the or of the one that is in the first position, or the principal, as say something. It is peculiar because that a specific piece has been used in millennia and it still exists today. Is the one that I use. Or for example, if I use my fedora, it's a remembrance that in some senses the colonial governments were giving permissions to certain individuals to wear hats as they use in Europe as recognition of their importance. Sometimes that is the
Yeah, I
point.
noticed that because, like, in English, we don't use the word Don except for the Italian mafia. And so when we see a Mexican guy wearing, especially a Guatemalan guy, a Mayan guy usually, wearing a fedora and he's calling himself Don, it implies that kind of reverence. Like, oh, this is the grandfather. He's the real boss. Don't make him angry.
Yeah, of course. And
Not to
in
say
my
that, yeah.
In my case, I have been jumping into fighting back the denial of our importance, not because I pretend to be important, but because we hold still a millennial years knowledge. And it is important to retransmit the importance that my own society gives to me. For example, let's say people has been seeing my pictures with my suitable suit, my big handkerchief, my big ceremonial headcloth, and my fedora, and my people do respect that on me because I wear it with dignity and with pride, and because that brings the importance of the knowledge we hold, not as the opposite, not as the guy that is close to the lake selling ayahuasca and doing ceremonies with whatever. There's a code to be respected, and by the way, I have to cross the stages in my own town and in the lineages and the recognition with the authentic authorities to hold them. Then it is a symbol of my position and the recognition of what I do. Then in the way I dress, or my fellow members, or another people on the lineage, the specific way is to send a way of communicate who you are, which is the level you belong, and even what extra things you can do. And there are more codes as the red ribbons, also the way of the embroidery, the way in which the embroidery is, the loincloth. That is no other thing than the old loincloth of the ancient times. The neck collars, who are usually also inherited from your grandfather, and things like that. Then it's a code, it's a way to select you, it's a way to recognize your position, and it's also the way of a communication for a person to know who you are and to later on in the community call you for that.
So how does the community respond to outsiders wearing these articles of clothing?
Well, it depends because, well, as far as I know, in my community, I'm the only one.
Ah, I see. You're dressed
Because
like the ancient.
exactly. There are so many ways to dress, by the way. It also can change by community. Some communities
Sure.
use two head clothes. Some of them does not use hats. Some of them use fedoras. Some of them use only straw hats. Some straw hats with ribbons. Some use remembrances or elements like they look like a rosary in the Catholic. Some use jade, the colors. It depends on the community and the ways of the proper codes from the community. In my case, I was not born in town, but my father was, and when I come with the dress like this, people recognize, okay, he's faithful to the roots.
Fabian, it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you. It's been a long time too. I checked the history, and
Yeah,
we haven't talked in a few years, so it's really good.
yeah, it's really good. But we're going to continue. And for the people that is listening us, I will ask. They can send us questions. They can begin to interact with us towards a foster communication, right? And thank you for the lovely evening, night now here in Mexico. As I said, I'm going to go onto a herbal bath, very beautifully prepared, to heal myself. And see you later.
Yeah. Take care. Good night. Bye bye.
Ciao.